She was a Caribbean immigrant who refused to bow to any man. He was a Charleston street soldier with a genius for strategy. Together, they built an empire that made the Italian mob nervous and gave Harlem something it desperately needed: black power that couldn't be bought, broken, or silenced. This is the story of Madame Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson, two of the most brilliant, ruthless, and misunderstood figures in black history. Their alliance wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, survival, and a refusal to let white mobsters control black neighborhoods. And what they accomplished together would change Harlem forever. If you're here for real black history, the stories they don't teach in schools, the power moves our ancestors made when the system tried to erase them, hit that subscribe button right now. We're diving deep into the lives of two legends who built something powerful in a world designed to destroy them. Harlem in the 1920s and 30s wasn't just the capital of black culture, it was a battlefield. The Harlem Renaissance was in full bloom. Jazz poured out of speakeasies. Langston Hughes was writing poetry. Zora Neale Hurston was documenting our stories. Duke Ellington was making magic at the Cotton Club. For the first time in American history, black creativity, intelligence, and culture were undeniable. But underneath all that brilliance was struggle. Harlem was overcrowded, segregated, and economically strangled. Black folks couldn't get bank loans, couldn't own property in most neighborhoods, couldn't get decent jobs no matter how educated they were. The Great Migration had brought hundreds of thousands of black people north, searching for freedom, and what they found was a different kind of oppression. So our people created their own economies, their own systems, their own power structures, and at the center of Harlem's underground economy was the policy racket, the numbers game. It was a lottery system where people bet pennies, nickels, and dimes on three-digit numbers. Winners could collect payouts that changed lives overnight. For poor black families, it was hope, a chance, a way to dream. And two people mastered that game better than anyone: Madame Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson. Their partnership would become legendary, not just because of the money they made, but because of what they represented: resistance, intelligence, black excellence in a world that wanted us invisible. Let's start with the woman who started it all. Stephanie St. Clair was born around 1897 in Martinique, a French Caribbean island. Details about her early life are scarce. She was a private woman, and much of her story has been lost or deliberately hidden. But what we know is this: she arrived in Harlem sometime around 1912 during the early waves of Caribbean immigration to New York. She came with nothing. No family connections, no money, no formal education, just ambition, intelligence, and an iron will. Harlem in 1912 was already filling up with black migrants, from the South, from the Caribbean, from everywhere our people were seeking something better. And Stephanie quickly realized something crucial. In America, especially for black women, the system wasn't designed to let you win, so you had to build your own system. She started small, working domestic jobs, saving every penny, watching how money moved through Harlem's streets, and she noticed something: the numbers game. Policy, also called playing the numbers, was wildly popular in black neighborhoods. People would place small bets on three-digit numbers, and if their number hit, they'd win big. The odds were long, but the dream was real. And in a community locked out of legitimate wealth building, those dreams mattered. Here's the twist: white gangsters controlled most of the numbers operations. They'd collect bets from black neighborhoods, take the profits, and give nothing back to the community except exploitation. Stephanie saw that and decided to change it. By the early 1920s, Stephanie St. Clair had done the impossible. She'd built her own numbers operation run by black people for black people. She wasn't just a banker, she was a protector. She paid out winnings fairly. She hired black runners, black accountants, black enforcers. She reinvested money into Harlem's community. And she refused, absolutely refused, to let white mobsters, corrupt cops, or crooked politicians push her around. People started calling her Queenie, Madame St. Clair, the Queen of Policy, and she wore that title like armor. But running a numbers operation in Harlem wasn't just about math and money, it was about survival. Stephanie faced threats from every direction. Corrupt NYPD officers demanded bribes. White mobsters wanted her territory. Rival black operators resented her success, and city officials wanted to shut down the entire numbers game. Not because gambling was illegal, white-run casinos operated openly, but because black people were making money. The racism was suffocating. Cops would raid her offices, arrest her runners, confiscate her cash, and then demand payoffs to leave her alone. It was extortion with a badge, but here's what made Stephanie different. She fought back publicly. She didn't hide. She didn't apologize. She took out full-page ads in black newspapers, the Amsterdam News, the Pittsburgh Courier, calling out police corruption by name. She exposed crooked cops, racist judges, and dirty politicians. She documented every shakedown, every illegal arrest, every injustice. In one famous 1930 ad, she wrote, "I am not a criminal. I am a businesswoman serving my community. The real criminals are the police who extort us and the judges who protect them." That took guts, massive, dangerous, life-threatening guts, for a black woman in 1930s America to openly challenge white authority. That was revolutionary, and it made her a target. By the early 1930s, the Italian mob, led by figures like Dutch Schultz, had decided Harlem was too profitable to ignore. They wanted control of the policy racket, all of it, and they were willing to use violence, intimidation, and murder to get it. Stephanie St. Clair needed an ally, someone smart, someone ruthless, someone who understood Harlem's streets as well as she understood its economics. She needed Bumpy Johnson. If you're already impressed by Madame St. Clair's courage and brilliance, drop a like on this video. It helps more people discover these untold stories of black power and resistance. By the time Stephanie St. Clair was building her empire, Bumpy Johnson was already becoming a legend on Harlem's streets. Born Ellsworth Raymond Johnson in Charleston, South Carolina in 1905, Bumpy had come to Harlem as a teenager, angry, brilliant, and determined to survive by any means necessary. He'd earned his nickname from a bump on his head, a deformity that made him a target for bullying as a child. But instead of breaking him, it forged him into something harder, sharper, and more dangerous than anyone expected. By the late 1920s, Bumpy was working as an enforcer in Harlem's underworld. But he wasn't just muscle, he was a strategist. He read voraciously, studied philosophy, history, military tactics. He understood power not just as violence, but as psychology, loyalty, and timing. And he understood something crucial about Harlem. The community respected strength. But they loved intelligence and fairness even more. Bumpy didn't just shake people down, he protected them. He mediated disputes. He made sure elderly folks in his neighborhood were safe. He became a Robin Hood figure, a criminal, yes, but one who belonged to the community, not against it. That's why when Stephanie St. Clair needed someone to help her protect her operation from the Italian mob, Bumpy Johnson was the perfect choice. He was loyal, strategic, fearless, and he shared her core belief: Harlem belonged to black people, and no white gangster was going to take it without a fight. The exact details of how Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson first connected are lost to history. Some say she recruited him after seeing his intelligence and discipline. Others say he sought her out, recognizing that her operation was the most sophisticated in Harlem. What's clear is this: by the early 1930s, they'd formed a partnership that combined her financial genius with his street power. Stephanie handled the business side, managing the numbers, paying out winnings, keeping detailed records, and navigating the complex web of bribes and legal threats. Bumpy handled enforcement, protecting her runners, intimidating rivals, and making sure anyone who threatened the operation faced consequences. But this wasn't a typical boss-enforcer relationship. It was a partnership built on mutual respect. Stephanie treated Bumpy as an equal. She valued his intelligence, trusted his judgment, and gave him autonomy. In return, Bumpy was fiercely loyal to her. He didn't just work for Madame St. Clair, he believed in what she represented. Together, they built something unprecedented: a black-owned, black-operated criminal enterprise that functioned like a legitimate business. They kept meticulous financial records, paid taxes under fake business names, hired black accountants and lawyers, created a system that was harder to dismantle than typical street operations. They weren't just hustlers, they were institution builders. But here's the question that would define their legacy. Could two black operators hold off the full force of the Italian mob, corrupt police, and a racist judicial system all at once? The answer would come soon, and it would be written in blood. In 1931, Dutch Schultz, a violent, ruthless white mobster, decided he wanted Harlem's policy racket. All of it. Schultz was connected. He had NYPD cops on his payroll. He had political protection. He had soldiers willing to kill without hesitation. And he saw Harlem as easy money, a black neighborhood he could muscle into submission. He was wrong. Schultz started by threatening independent black operators, offering them a choice: work for him or get shut down. Many caved, some fled, a few fought back, and were beaten, shot, or run out of town. Then Schultz turned his attention to Madame St. Clair. He sent messengers with an ultimatum: hand over her operation or face the consequences. She could keep a percentage of the profits, but he'd control the business. Stephanie's response: she told them to go to hell, and then she prepared for war. With Bumpy Johnson at her side, Stephanie fortified her operation. They moved money to secure locations. They armed their runners. They built alliances with other black operators who were tired of being pushed around. And they sent a message back to Schultz: Harlem isn't for sale. Schultz responded with violence. His men firebombed policy banks, beat up runners, intimidated customers, bribed cops to raid Stephanie's operation specifically, ignoring white-run gambling dens a block away. For the black residents of Harlem, this wasn't just a gang war, it was an invasion. Dutch Schultz represented everything they'd fled the South to escape: white supremacy, economic exploitation, and the belief that black people's lives and businesses didn't matter. Stephanie and Bumpy became symbols of resistance, and the community rallied around them. The war between Stephanie St. Clair and Dutch Schultz lasted years, and it was brutal. Schultz had more money, more guns, and more political protection. But Stephanie and Bumpy had something more powerful: community support and strategic brilliance. Bumpy orchestrated counterattacks that were surgical. When Schultz's men tried to intimidate a policy bank, Bumpy's crew was waiting. When Schultz bribed cops to raid Stephanie's offices, Bumpy made sure rival white operations got raided the same night, forcing the NYPD to either arrest everyone or admit they were being selective. Stephanie, meanwhile, continued her public relations war. She used the black press to expose Schultz's tactics, painting him as a racist thug trying to steal from black families. She documented every act of violence, every bribe, every injustice. And it worked. Schultz became toxic in Harlem. Even black folks who weren't involved in the numbers game hated him. He wasn't just an enemy of Stephanie St. Clair, he was an enemy of the community. Then in 1935, something happened that changed everything. Dutch Schultz was murdered. He was shot in a Newark restaurant by rival mobsters, not because of Harlem, but because of internal mob politics. Schultz had become too violent, too unpredictable, and the Italian crime families decided he was a liability. When Stephanie St. Clair heard the news, legend says she sent a telegram to his hospital bed that read, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." That's the story anyway. Whether it's true or not, it's become part of the legend, because it perfectly captures who Stephanie was. Defiant, unflinching, unbreakable. With Schultz dead, the pressure on Stephanie and Bumpy eased, but it didn't disappear. Other mobsters still wanted Harlem. Corrupt cops still demanded bribes. The fight wasn't over. But they'd won something crucial: respect, and proof that black people could stand up to white power and survive. But here's the question that haunted both of them. How long could they hold on to that power, and what would it cost them? Put yourself in their shoes for a second. If you were facing down corrupt cops, violent mobsters, and a system designed to crush you, would you have fought back like they did, or would you have taken the safer path? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you do. The partnership between Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson didn't end with Dutch Schultz's death, but it did evolve. By the late 1930s, the numbers game in Harlem was changing. The Italian mob, particularly the Luciano and Genovese families, continued trying to gain control, but they took a different approach. Instead of open war, they offered partnerships. They'd provide political protection and police payoffs in exchange for a cut of the profits. It was a Faustian bargain, and different operators made different choices. Bumpy Johnson, always the pragmatist, eventually formed working relationships with Italian mobsters, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. He understood that total independence might not be sustainable, but he could negotiate terms that preserved black control over day-to-day operations. Stephanie St. Clair, however, was done. By the early 1940s, she'd largely stepped away from the policy racket. She'd been arrested multiple times, spent time in prison, and grown exhausted by the constant battles with police and mobsters. She didn't bow, she chose to walk away on her own terms. She spent her later years as an activist, continuing to expose police corruption and fight for black rights in Harlem. She never stopped being a voice for her community. Bumpy Johnson, meanwhile, continued rising through Harlem's underworld. He'd become one of the most powerful black gangsters in America, working alongside the Italian mob but never subservient to them. He maintained his Robin Hood reputation, protecting Harlem residents, mediating disputes, and ensuring that black neighborhoods weren't just exploited. So what's their legacy? Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson proved that black people could build power in a system designed to deny them power. They showed that intelligence, courage, and community loyalty could stand up to racism, corruption, and violence. Were they criminals? Yes. Did they break laws? Absolutely. But in a country where the laws themselves were designed to oppress black people, their defiance was resistance. Their business was survival. Their legacy is proof that our ancestors refused to be erased. For the black residents of Harlem in the 1930s, Stephanie and Bumpy weren't just gangsters, they were protectors. They were symbols of what was possible when black people refused to bow. And that legacy lives on. Every time we build our own businesses, every time we resist unjust systems, every time we refuse to let anyone tell us we don't belong, we're channeling the same spirit that drove Madame St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson. This is the real story of Harlem's power duo, not sanitized, not simplified, but understood in all its complexity. Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson weren't perfect. They operated in a criminal world. They made choices that hurt people, but they also built something that mattered in a time when mattering was an act of rebellion. They represented black excellence in the face of systemic oppression. They proved that intelligence and strategy could compete with violence and corruption, and they gave Harlem something it desperately needed: proof that black power was real, sustainable, and unbreakable. Their story isn't just history. It's a reminder. A reminder that our people have always been brilliant, courageous, and resilient, that we've always built power even when the system tried to destroy us, and that we've always had leaders, flawed, complicated, human leaders, who refused to let us be invisible. Stephanie St. Clair and Bumpy Johnson didn't just run the policy racket. They ran a revolution, and Harlem has never forgotten. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something you didn't know, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're documenting the untold stories of black power, resistance, and brilliance that shaped America. Next up, we're diving into Bumpy Johnson's alliance with the Italian mob, the violent wars of the 1940s, and how he became the undisputed godfather of Harlem. Drop a comment telling me which part of their story surprised you most. I read every single one. This is our history, our legacy, and it's time the world knew the truth. See you in the next one.